Hi, Mr. Cartner. I would just like to take a few minutes to run through your EPC for Miller's Conference Centre. It's just to highlight some of the items for you. So we'll go through it, and then if you have any questions at the end, then you can put them to me and I'll be happy to respond. Okay, so here we have a copy of the EPC for Miller's Hotel. As you can see, just at a first glance, there's a number of different sections in it, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to give a quick overview of the information in the various sections to give you a better understanding of what's actually included within the certificate itself. So just starting at the top of the certificate, you can see it says Energy Performance Certificate, non-domestic building, of course, and has the address of the building that the certificate is relative to. It also, on the right hand side, has a certificate reference number. This number is unique to the building and unique to the report. So what you can do is you can take that report and you can go to the central register for the EPCs, which is NDEA and put in that number, and a copy of the report will be available to you. And just down below the address and the unique reference number, we then have the Energy Performance Asset Rating, and this is particular for your building. So the building has achieved a rating of 67. As you can see, that equates to a C, and there's a little bit more information on how that relates to similar buildings further on down the certificate. So on the bottom right hand side of the certificate, you can see there's a section for benchmarks. Now what these are a guide for you in terms of how your building performs against both new buildings and existing stock of a similar age and construction. So new builds, you can see, would achieve a 27, which is considerably lower than your building at 67. And then we've got typical stock with ratings of 80. So the building isn't the worst performing building, but it's obviously not as good performing as a new construction. As well as the benchmarks, there's also further information on the left hand side, which gives you a direct indication of the building's performance. So you can see the building's carbon emissions rate is 56.05, and that's measured in kilograms of carbon dioxide per metre squared per year. And also your primary energy usage is 331 kilowatt hours per metre squared per year. You can also see from the technical information that your main heating fuel is grid supplied electricity, and of course your main building environment service is air conditioning, because we have 3 split systems within the building. As well as the EPC, there's also a secondary document called the recommendation report. So we talked about the benchmarks for the building against new buildings, and also the existing stock against your own building's asset rating. Well, what this recommendation report does is it makes some comment in terms of improvements to your building to improve both its efficiency and reduce its carbon emissions overall. And this really picks up from some of the things that we saw whenever we carried out the inspection. So the report generally covers 3 things. It'll cover short-term, medium-term and long-term recommendations. So I'm just going to go through quickly and cover some of those recommendations and give you some further information on those. Firstly, we'd like to start with the long-term recommendations. So the main recommendation long-term is to change the air conditioning systems within the building. Now, there's various reasons for that. Firstly, the systems are very old and they will have lost their efficiency over time, but more importantly, they use a refrigerant called R22, which is legally no longer allowed to be used. So therefore, the volume of refrigerant can't be topped up. So that again will greatly impact upon the overall efficiency and performance of the system. Secondly, as you look at some of the photographs here, the first one on the left hand side is of the units installed inside the roof void. The ductwork has been disconnected from some of the units. It's also crushed. So again, that adds to the inefficiency of the system. And on the right hand side, you can see a controller in the room, and this would be typical of the controllers in the space, that they're poorly installed. This one's hanging off the wall, and it's not clear from even looking at the screen that they're actually connected to the unit, that they're doing the job that they should. I think they've had a level of abuse. So here you can see a couple of images of the outdoor units that are connected to the indoor units. So you can see there's a lot of moss on the units, which doesn't really impact upon their performance. However, you can just see from the age of them and the overgrowth around them that they're probably not working as efficient as what they should be. And secondly, on the photograph on the right hand side, you can see on the plate on the units, it mentions the use of the R22, which can no longer be used in the industry. So the air conditioning would come under the long-term recommendations. On the short term, some of the lighting within the building isn't that efficient. Some of it's old. It's obviously been there for a number of years as well. So it's relatively easy to change the fittings, relatively cheap to change the fittings as well, and that will also enhance the reduction in the carbon emissions and the overall efficiency of the building. Not to the same extent as the air conditioning, but it will certainly contribute to an improvement. So with these long-term and short-term recommendations, we've carried out an exercise to look at what the cost and environmental impact is in terms of changing it. So a lot of detail there, but just to go through some of the highlights of it. To replace the air conditioning systems and to replace the lighting, we estimate that cost to be £5,850. Now, if you change the lighting and the air conditioning, we have estimated that to achieve a reduced energy usage of 2,447 kilowatt hours per annum, which is the equivalent of £313 saving in current costs for electricity. And that's a 21.3% reduction in running costs, which isn't to be snubbed at. Secondly, on the right hand side, we can see your carbon emissions will be reduced by 11,882 kilograms of carbon per annum, which again is a reduction of 20.5%, which is a substantial reduction in the carbon emissions for the building. So what the overall savings equate to is a payback period of 18 years, which seems substantial, but in actual fact, the air conditioning systems have already reached the end of their useful life, and because of the statutory requirements on the R22 refrigerant, we highly recommend that those units be changed to something that's more efficient and more in keeping with today's technology in terms of global warming potential. So we would make the recommendation that the air conditioning certainly be changed as soon as possible. The lighting can be changed as well. There's minimal cost with the lighting, there's minimal impact in terms of the building and the usage, and there's very little downtime in that as well. So we would make the recommendation that they are also done. So that really concludes the run through the EPC and the recommendations report. Obviously there's a lot of information there, some of it technical, some of it relates to statutory requirements. So if you have any queries, feel free to put them to me and I'll be only happy to respond.